Must be funny that we are trying to have conversations about whether we're going to be authentic or not. But it must be funny if you think that we were always supposed to be authentic. There was no question around when we were born, am I going to be authentic? Is my child going to be authentic? Because we were supposed to just, much like we would be alive, to be authentic, to be able to be authentic. But that was not the truth for a lot of us. And the reason it was not the truth for a lot of us is because we were raised in environments that shut down our authenticity. And it shut down our authenticity under the pretense that we were supposed to be someone else so that we can fit in and therefore belong. They were doing it to protect us, right? Before we begin, I want to read to you something I wrote down yesterday. I wrote this: the cost of you living in your power is to be rejected by those who don't actualize their own greatness. Do with this what you will. But we build our entire network of belonging based on who we pretended to be. And then I went on to write, being authentic should not have been an optional thing or something we'd ever consider not doing. But here we are, victims of environments that told us in every possible way that being who we are is somehow not enough to secure us the permission to exist in these environments and belong. So in a way, reclaiming our right to be authentic may well threaten that belonging that we acquired based on not being authentic. But we ultimately have to come to this painful choice. It's two roads we need to choose. What is costing us more? Not honoring who we are and fitting in boxes other created for us, dimming our own light, hiding our own power, pretending we're less than, pretending we're somebody else altogether so that we can be more digestible, right? Easy to digest, mingle, and just be part of a larger group, belong in a herd, or honoring our unique nature and risking not belonging to anyone but ourselves. I posted this yesterday, and then I went on to say I would be choosing the second over and over and over again. But at the same time, I understand the wisdom or the intelligence of the younger me that decided that that was not an option for her. We have a lot to learn from our younger selves in terms of how we survive, what helps us survive, what makes our survival possible. Let me just make a note because I'm going to forget. I've already forgot. Our younger selves knew what was possible for us or not, what was more dangerous, what was more safe. And every choice we made back then was the suitable choice or the safest choice we could have. And that choice could have been, of course, dimming our own light, of course, fitting in, of course, conforming to authority, of course, fawning to the people who abused us, of course, denying that they were abusing us, of course, blaming ourselves for what was happening to us as a way to control the outcome, right? If it was our fault for how they were treating us and not because they were horrible people, then that meant if we were to ever change, then they would probably be nicer to us. So assuming responsibility is something we do when we're kids, but in a very naive way. We assume responsibility for things we're not responsible for. Basically, when we're kids, we're not responsible for anything. But then we become adults that continue to hold on to those fake responsibilities, to those childlike responsibilities, but don't really take responsibility of our own lives. So we're kind of lying to ourselves, right? We think we are responsible for how people feel for us, for how much they like us, for how happy everyone around us is. But we don't understand that we are responsible for our own happiness, for our own well-being, for the life that we're creating for ourselves. We leave that on those around us, right? We're still living like children, trying to get the adults around us to be nice to us so that we can finally be happy. And that's the important learning that comes through doing inner work, through revisiting the past versions of ourselves, through making sense of our story, why we chose what we chose, why we became who we became, and how that served us then. it's problematic that we have brought all our coping skills into a life that we're trying to be adults in. But for back then, we made the best possible choice with the resources we had, with the guidance we didn't get, with the way we adapt as people. It's pretty rigid, it's pretty quick. All these defense mechanisms are not something that we are necessarily in control of, but thankfully exist to keep us from giving up. Giving up at a younger age is not something we can easily recover from because we have no resources. Giving up at any age, fully and completely giving up, like defeated kind of give up, is a very, very dark place to be for anyone, but specifically for a child. And what happens as we grow is we keep finding opportunities to want to give up and dark places that we want to hide in forever and just never try again. But what hopefully happens as we grow up is we develop this knowing that it's going to get better, that we've been through that before, and we know that there's a way out. I got really depressed when I was about 15, and actually nobody even realized. I put on a good show that I was doing great, but I spent a lot of my time in my room trying to sleep days away. I remember I was just sleeping a lot and thinking, I just, whenever I would wake up in the morning, be like, another day? I have to deal with another day. And then months later, I remember somebody at the gym said to me, oh gosh, this is the first time I'm seeing you smile. I've known you for so long, I've never seen you smile. And I thought to myself, how interesting that this person noticed. I wasn't smiling this entire time, and nobody else noticed that I wasn't smiling. It kind of got me thinking on how well do people around us really know, and how connected are we to them, and how much we express to them what we feel. But the point of me sharing the story is that when I got depressed again, at the age of, I guess it was 23, I remember thinking, I've been through this before and I made it out. And not only that, I thought to myself, last time I went through it, I had no idea what was happening. And every time that, I guess we think that when we heal, when we do our work, nothing will affect us anymore. And to be very honest, ever since I was very serious about the work that I've done, I feel further and further away from the version of me that would get so depressed ever again. That said, there's no security in that. Mental health can be strong, but it's also very fragile. Because at some point, the capacity and the things that can happen to us may be too much for the bandwidth that we have. But what I have learned through my journey of doing this work is that I went through unimaginable things, at least for where I was at, huge things, hurtful experiences, dark spaces, hiding away from life for years. And not only nobody knew, so I couldn't share this with anyone. It was like a very lonely place. But what is admirable is that a younger me with no knowledge found a way out of it. And I didn't find the best ways out of it, right? I leaned onto daydreaming. I leaned onto addiction later on. I leaned on to self-harm and self-hatred. I leaned on intellectualizing, of course, which led me to be very good in terms of understanding thoughts. I mean, there's always benefits to the things that we learn. But what I'm saying is that whatever happened to you, however horrible it was, the fact that you're here watching this tells me that you are more powerful than you think, and you're resilient. And even if you possibly found ways to cope that are now harmful to you, back then they were just the only thing that you could do to stay alive. I post a lot of things about limerence on other platforms. And I get this comment quite often of people saying, if it wasn't for limerence, I wouldn't have been alive. Or I'm so glad limerence helped me do all these things, blah, blah, and all of that. And I totally get it. In the same way, any addiction is not intended to ruin our lives. The addiction is coming as a coping mechanism to help us cope with our unbearable or seemingly unbearable lives. So anything you have done in order to survive is what you have done in order to survive, because you wouldn't have survived if you hadn't done that. And the reason I know this is because you're here. Some people may not be so lucky. The things they chose to do in order to survive brought them to the end of their lives or to worse situations that they started in. But I think that applies to most of us. All the strict and rigid coping mechanisms have, in one way or the next, prevented us from living our lives fully. So we may be here, but we're not really here. We're not really connected to the people around us. We're not connected to ourselves. We're not connected to our experiences. We don't experience joy. We don't experience fulfillment. We don't utilize our potential. So we're just here, just to be here, just to say, yeah, I made it. I'm here. I'm working my 9 to 5. I come home. I hate my life. I hate my job. I hate my partner. I hate everything. But I'm still here, aren't I? And so my work is geared a lot towards people like me, like you, that have dealt with a lot of darkness on their own, but they kind of remain stuck in that darkness for too long on their own. And what I do, especially in my one-on-ones, is I give the space for those parts of you that nobody heard, nobody witnessed, nobody validated, to show up and to be heard. And by holding space for those parts, I mean, I'm just modeling the holding space aspect. The fact that you are willing to open that up in session awakens a different way of experiencing yourself that you didn't know was possible. Sharing ourselves is a very unique experience that, when done with safe people, is healing. It's just so healing. What's also healing is connection to people. What's also healing is feeling aligned with your life finally, after just being stuck and just living. And I say all these things, and it may sound like, oh, so all I have to do in order to feel happy is find my purpose in life. So are you going to help me find my purpose in life? And I want to say that part of also my own journey was people were promising things to me that they couldn't deliver, right? I'm going to help you do this. I'm going to help you do the other. And I had this approach of let them do it for me kind of thing, right? Although I was always a person who wanted to learn at some point, I didn't think I was able to take real responsibility of my own life. But I learned that there's nobody on this earth more able than ourselves to get ourselves back on track. But there are people who can give us a hand, a helping hand, and a guiding sort of map, at least for the beginning. But then we have to pave our own way. And to pave our own way, we have to do enough work with ourselves so that we're no longer looking for people to tell us, should we go left or should we go right, right? In the first steps, we may ask that, right? They may be like, hey, get up, go this direction. But so many people, and I see it so much, right? When I post all these things and people ask me questions that are like, what about my story? What about if this is happening, right? I share a lot of things in order to get people to think broadly and openly. But then people want to be like, what about my case? What about this? What happens is, if we're just looking for these answers, this cookie cutter answers, we will always be looking for a savior. And that savior could be God or a cult leader, I don't know, or a partner that shows up and magnificently puts your life in place. But I feel like this has a lot of paternal energy to it, or maternal, depending. But it's more like we're looking for guidance so much that we would almost regress into being children so that we can be guided for someone bigger, because we're still thinking we're small and the world is too big for us, when that is not the case. What is, though, small still, we're not small, but what is small still is our capacity to take on our lives and to deal with the disappointments of our lives. Not because this is easy for everybody else but not for us, but because we also have piled up and accumulated disappointment and grief from our past. that has us full. It's almost like one more drop and we're gone. It's just unbearable. We hold a lot of grief, and that grief needs to be processed for the grief that it is. Most of us hold grief for one reason or the next. But those raised by narcissistic parents hold a vault full of grief, a box, a Pandora's box they keep closed, because if it was ever to be opened, there's just too much. There's just too much to deal with at once. But what happens with life is that no matter how much we avoid feeling the things that we said we're not going to feel, remembering the things that we said we're going to forget, understanding how much we were failed, or how much we went through, or how much we were hurt, even if we decided we're never going to come to those realizations, because the past is the past, right? Why this obsession with the past? But the thing is, life has its way to bring us into situations where it's going to be inevitable to deal with that grief one way or the next. And it's not like life is forcing us there, but the way our subconscious mind operates, it's guided by trying to resolve. So we will unconsciously pick up on things that will drive us and get us nearer to situations that are going to help us replay the past in the hopes that we will resolve it. But what happens? This is a compulsive repetition that Freud spoke about, which is a psychic mechanism that sort of help us bring back these almost like reenactments of traumatic events with different faces in different environments, in the hopes we'll do differently. But what happens within this compulsive repetition is that we choose the same type of people, and we usually have the same type of result, because we've not outgrown the child that we were then. So people say a lot about, oh, when I healed, I no longer attract narcissists. Or when I heal, I no longer attract whatever. No. That's the thing. We keep not attracting. These people still exist. These dynamics still exist. The patterns still exist. But what changes if we truly heal, if we truly are doing our work, is how we approach things. Do we approach them like adults? So we set boundaries, we choose differently, we say no. Or just because somebody's love bombing us, we're like, well, they love bomb me, so what else am I going to do? You're not a flower, and this bee is just sort of coming and sitting on you. You're a whole person. And so when this bee's coming at you, you're like, get out of here. You spray the bee. I like to use this. I have one of these in every room in my house because I'm afraid of cockroaches. Anyway, so the difference is that we become different. We don't become different. Let me rephrase that. We respond differently. And also when we respond differently, people also think, why do I feel so bad that I set boundaries? Why do I feel so bad that I said no? Why do I feel so guilty? It was not supposed to feel good. That's why we never did it. And if you ask me, guilt is not such a big price to pay for your emotional freedom, right? I hear people who have sort of estranged themselves from their parents or are trying to distance themselves from their parents say to me, I feel so guilty. I've done it and it feels so much better, but then I feel guilty. But then I feel guilty. Just because you feel guilty, it doesn't mean that you're supposed to not do what you're doing. This guilt that you're carrying is normal. It's normal that you feel guilt. You've been indoctrinated your entire life that you're supposed to be a good kid, an obedient kid, a good daughter, a good son, whatever. And you were supposed to tolerate being abused. And also you were told that you're ungrateful if you don't do these things. And who wants to be the ungrateful child? Who wants to be so bad, right? So you're sitting with, but I feel guilty, but I feel bad. So what? That's not information to act upon. It's information to just experience and sit with. But what we do is we feel bad, or we feel guilty, or we feel ashamed, and we try to act so we get out of that feeling. Again, run away, avoid it. Our mechanisms of avoidance are really the first thing we go to. But that doesn't resolve it, because if we go back into the cycles with the same people, or we do the same things over again, just because we couldn't stay away, then we are stuck again, right? And we can't really grow if we keep going back to environments that kept us small. I don't know how many times I'm going to have to say this. Keep going back to these environments, be it relationships, friendships, workplaces, family, forcing yourself into boxes that you don't even fit in. But each time you go back, you'll make yourself smaller again in order to fit in. And then maybe, who knows, you forget who you are. This is like anything, right? If you're trying to lose weight and you stop working out, at some point you're going to go back to not being fit. And that's what it is. Being a different person or showing up differently as an adult takes practice. But you can also regress. And we can regress in moments of stress, in moments that life sort of happens to us, but also in moments where we're not able to show up like adults. We force ourselves back into those positions to alleviate the sense of guilt and shame or whatever it is that we're carrying because of what we've been told is good or bad for us to do. Which brings me to say that authenticity and being our authentic self is an act of rebellion. We're rebelling. And generally, if we're wanting to be authentic, we have to not just, I'm going to be authentic. I'm just going to share how I feel. I'm just going to say what I think. I'm also going to deconstruct everything that made me so that I can pick it up from the beginning and decide what am I assuming to be true that may not be true for me, right? And that includes so much of our cultural conditioning, so much of what we've been told we should do: get married, have kids, be like this, be like the other, do this, look like that, act like this, respect your elders, all these things. All these rules that come from societies that are highly influenced, or should I just say co-structured in patriarchy, all the foundations of one hold the other together, means that they have so many underpinnings that are trying to keep people, and especially women, small, obedient. So these stories, these things that we learn from kids, right? We have to respect our elders when elders do not respect us. We have to be kind to our parents and take care of them when they get old, when they didn't take care of us when we were young, when they didn't respect us, when they didn't just, we are being taught this sense of unconditionality or forgiveness sets you free. So the victim has to be the one who does something so that the person who abused them is basically off the hook. And I know people are going to say, that's not what forgiveness is. I know what forgiveness is. But what I'm saying is that we are now putting it on the victim's responsibility, that their freedom, their emotional freedom, comes from forgiving the person who abused them, when in reality, and for a good period after you've been hurt, not forgiving and being angry with that person is going to keep you safe. Because if you're angry, you're not going to go back and they're not going to hurt you again. So this bypassing, this oppressive way of everybody in line, you have to be married by 30 before you grow up, before you start thinking for yourself, because, and we see it now, right? The first generations that have the choice to not have kids or not get married are really taking it on. And they're like, oh gosh, I didn't know I could do that. Why? Why was society so much in a rush for you to get married so quickly? Why is society so much in a rush for you to be in line, for you to have this many kids? If you have one, why don't you have two? If you have two, why don't you have a third? So all of these things, there's no right or wrong, but I want you to be at a place where you start deciding them for yourself, if they're good for you, if you want them for you. And sometimes we're so caught up in seeing all of everybody just follow that path like a herd going somewhere. And we're like, oh, I'm left out. But we don't really see that we're at a place where, like, what if I pave my own path? And although you're unique, everybody is, that's not a unique experience. Although your path will be. Many people are deciding the path. But coming to the courage of following that path means that you found the courage to be rejected by everyone else that didn't follow the path. And that is aligned with that note that I read in the beginning, that the cost of you living in your power is to be rejected by those who are not actualizing their own greatness. You will not belong, not because you're great, and this is not like a narcissistic kind of thing, but it's because you are brave enough to be yourself. And many people around you will resent you for it, because you are exercising a freedom they didn't know they had. And that makes them bitter. But also, unfortunately, people seem to be attracted by sameness, right? Whereas being authentic doesn't mean you find the same people who think as you do, who also have the same view of marriage, or also have the same view of religion, or they might help or whatever. But it's finding people who are just also authentic themselves. That's the only commonality between the way that you connect once you're authentic is not sameness. Are we the same? That's not the authentic way to connect, because authenticity embraces being different, being yourself, not sameness. Not, are you the same as me? I like you. Are you the same as me? As you belong with me. Or do you think the same way I do? We belong together. We belong to be in the tribe that thinks in this way. Whereas authenticity and connection through authenticity says, are you yourself? That's it. That's all I need in order to be able to connect with you. That's the thing you will see when you're living in more authentic ways. You can no longer be around people who don't, because it's frustrating. It's frustrating for both them and you, because you cannot freely express that authenticity, and they will not stop pushing you to be like them. But anyway, what I'm saying is that finding your belonging as someone who is authentic is a risk-taking behavior. If you take it from how we were created to live in flocks, right? In tribes. I say flocks because we've turned the tribes into flocks. We're just following, we're being herded somewhere all the time. But so it's a risk. It's a risk for your survival. And there's no reassurance that you will find somebody on the other way, on the other side, waiting for you. Like, hey, I'm authentic too. Let's be friends. Because maybe as you're sort of also choosing authenticity, you will still look for people like you, who think like you, who act like you, who are like you. And that leads to cults, right? But instead, you have to learn new ways to connect to people that are different than you, but are at least authentic to themselves. That's the criteria. Now, as a last note, I want to say that those who raised you did not want you to be authentic because they were not authentic themselves. That goes without saying. They also followed predetermined paths. They also followed rules. They did whatever was expected of them. So in a way, they didn't know how to predict your life path, if your life path would be something that you would create for yourself. They birthed you, and then they had already an idea of who they wanted you to be or who they expected you to be, right? It was supposed to be an easy thing. You grow up, you become whatever, doctor or whatever they thought you would become. You get married, you have 3 kids, 2, whatever, how many kids, and then that's it. They're able to help you do that life because that's what they did too. But if you started out like having different ideas, being unique, being different, they're probably like, this kid is problematic. What is wrong with you? My dad used to always tell me, why does everybody go that direction and you want to go the opposite? You're so, the word he used was more like to tell me that I'm upside down. Okay? So he was very frustrated that I wasn't doing what everybody else was doing. And fun fact, I sometimes tell myself the same, right? I'm on YouTube a lot and I'm trying to grow this channel and do more. And then I see other creators who I really respect and admire their work. And I know that they're drafting their videos, they're reading them, they're so organized with their content, they're teaching stuff in a very linear way. And I tell myself, why don't you also do that? Why don't you do this like everybody else? Why aren't you? I remember I was talking about it with a friend. I said, if I start reading out of something, I stop wanting to do the video. Why can't I just do it like everybody else is doing? Why are all these people so focused enough that they're able to write and read it, and I can't. And my friend's like, are you crazy? If these people could do that, they would do it. They can't. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. This isn't to say that that's somebody worse or bad, but you are taught early on to see the things that you're doing differently as bad. And you want to be like the others so bad because it seems like others are doing it better than you. Because, of course, that appeals maybe to more people. But I tried it, and it really kills my creativity, and it really kills my intention to connect with you. Because if I'm reading, okay, I'm going to read a note here or there, but if I'm just reading a text, I can't be bothered to make the video. And that's something that has to do also with the way my mind works and my creativity functions. If I write it, I don't feel like talking about it. If I talk about it, I don't feel like writing it. So, this is for me more like a creative conversation that I bring to you based on the things that I've been thinking this week or noticing or, became aware of. But as I said, that growing up, for me, everything I did differently than others was something like, why are you like this? Why don't you? And so that still shows up for me sometimes in my life. And it's interesting to see how, in how many ways you possibly view the things that you do differently than others as a bad thing. It's not bad. It's just unique. It's just you. Now, is there a way to learn or improve or structure things better like other people do that are more structured than you or organized? Yes. But you don't have to be anybody else than yourself. You don't have to pretend to be different than who you are. You don't have to mute your authenticity. You don't have to mute your creativity. You don't have to be less than who you are. You don't have to pretend. And you don't have to deprive yourself of the luxury to express yourself freely and fully in this world that gives you the opportunity to do so. Again, that comes with a price. Criticism, mistakes, people don't like you, people talk bad about you, but it also comes with a warm welcoming from those who do, which is invaluable for me. And this sense of building community to people that are also working their way to get to a place where they can embrace their own authentic selves. And I see it because people share their stories so vulnerably, and that is authentic, right? That for me is authenticity. Being able to share who you are and share your experiences and share your thoughts and all of that, that to me is authenticity. And it's not performative either. It's more like people are reaching out, sharing to connect. And I see it because people are going to like their comments, they're going to write underneath. And that's what builds community. We're all in the effort to heal and to bring ourselves back to, the version of us that was just allowed to exist without thinking of what is expected of me in order to belong, right? Because trauma and childhood in general is, I guess, the most traumatic time of our lives because we are completely helpless and agencyless, and most of us are in the hands of people who are just messed up, right? So imagine you're helpless, agencyless, you're a kid, you can't just get out of there, and you're being raised by people who just want to shut you down. They're like, I don't want you to be this way. I want you to be that way. I keep saying things like that because that was my own experience. My dad would say, why are you more like your sister? And I was like, why would I want to be like my sister? Why would I want to be like someone else? I was a very reactive kid. And guess what? He hated that. But I'm really glad I was so reactive because that kept me stubborn enough to insist to come back to who I am, even if that's not like everybody else. And even if it's not so popular way of being, to just be who you are and embrace who you are with everything that you are, and still, of course, work on it. Nobody's perfect. Well, nobody's perfect, and nobody aspires to be perfect. I hope nobody would aspire to be perfect. As Jung says, our job in life is not perfection. It's wholeness, right? So whole means I bring all my parts, I bring all myself to the world instead of I'm going to hide this, I'm going to toss this, I'm going to pretend the other is something else, I'm going to project the other, I'm going to deny the other. It's like all this mess with our parts that hopefully we start embracing. And as we embrace, we also help heal. Because some people think embracing who we are is this entitled way of living. I don't care who's hurt. I don't care who feels this way. I'm going to be like that, right? And we almost weaponize our authenticity and our self-acceptance as a way to stay stuck. But acceptance is a little bit more. It's a little bit more of a deep way of thinking about ourselves as I can bring who I am in this world without shame of why I am the way I am. But also I can guide who I am to work on some things that I may be doing that are harmful for me or others, because we don't live here alone. We're sharing the world with others around us, and seeing the ways in which we impact others will hopefully have an impact on us and help us and motivate us to change. Something that many parents didn't get, right? They couldn't see the hurt in your eyes. They couldn't see the pain they were causing you, or they saw it. And for some reason, some twisted reason, they thought you deserved it. And so they didn't change. But usually when we see our effect on others, that should be enough to change. Not because we're ashamed, but because if we see it, it means we take responsibility for it. We take responsibility. And when we take responsibility, we do what we need to do in order to take care of those around us and ourselves, and in order to feel more peaceful about who we are and not constantly trying to deny the reality of who we're being to those we care about and to ourselves, right? Oh, I said too many things. Maybe I'll break this video up in two, but I want to say one last thing about you trying to find your authenticity. Don't set it as a goal to be this, that authenticity is this perfect version of you, because it's not. Authenticity is just the genuine version of you. So you're not masking, you're not suppressing your needs. You're not pretending you're someone else. You don't pretend you like people that you don't, but you don't hurt them. You just stop trying so hard to belong. And that happens when you stop being so afraid of rejection. When you stop being so afraid of being exiled by a group that forced you to be a certain way so that you can belong. And questioning all of these things that I mentioned earlier also brings some levels of isolation, because most of the people around you are not questioning them, or will shame you for questioning, especially when we're talking about spirituality. But if we don't examine, like this unexamined way of living and assuming everything as is, as truths that somebody else is feeding us, we are never free. And if we're never free, it means we're never driven by our own desires, our own calling of our own soul, of who we are to go forward. But we're driven by what the world expects of us, or what they said we should do, or our fears, what will happen if we don't listen, if we don't conform. Before we go, I want to read a paragraph from James Holly's book, Living an Examined Life. It goes like this: to be eccentric, not to fit in, to hear our own drama, these are the signs of our bringing our gift, our personhood to the table of life. It sounds so simple, but it is so difficult, not only because of all the disabling messages of the past, but also because to be that gift asks us to let go and trust that something within us is good enough, wise enough, strong enough to belong in this world. How dare one disregard what is seeking expression through us, to cower in the darkness of fear, to resist the gift that illuminates this otherwise colorless world. I will see you guys soon.